Alright, let me tell you about something that happened in this village called Otobo. After you hear this, you're going to learn to be a little more careful about things and to take your time with love. But first, if you dig what I'm doing here, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss anything. Now, Otobo was one lucky place. The soil was rich as heck, the rivers never ran dry, and folks lived pretty darn good. The farmers were pulling up more yams than they knew what to do with. The fishermen's nets were overflowing with fish, and the women? Man, the women of Otobo were famous for being beautiful all over the place. Guys would travel in from other villages just to get a glimpse, try their luck, you know? Some were hunting for wives, others just wanted to admire the view, but nobody had ever laid eyes on a woman quite like Adora. Adora was, wow. Her skin was like gold, smooth like she'd never worked a day in her life. Her eyes, they were small and bright, seemed like they could see right through you. No BS. And her smile? When she smiled, it could knock a man right off his feet. But Adora wasn't just a pretty face, she was a good person too. She always treated the elders with respect, played with the kids, and never acted like she was better than anybody else. That just made everyone love her even more. Now, her parents, Abuka and Nina, they'd lived in Otobo their whole lives, but nobody really knew much about Adora herself. She'd grown up in some town far away with her grandma, an old woman who people said knew some strange stuff. Some thought she could talk to spirits, knew secrets nobody else did. Others just thought it was a bunch of gossip. Either way, Adora lived with her until the old woman passed away. Now she was back home. She was the kind of woman men would fight over, the kind who could make a guy lose his mind. And one by one, they started coming around. The men of Otobo, they were strong, hardworking, full of life, you know? But then, one by one, they started getting real sick. First was Tachukwu. He was a young dude, real confident, always the loudest guy at gatherings, always the first to put his 2 cents in when the elders asked for opinions. One night, he was his usual self, laughing it up, showing off, messing with his friends. By morning, he could barely stand. His hands were shaking like crazy, sweat pouring off him, and his voice, which was usually so loud, was gone. He didn't last long. A few days later, he was dead. People were sad, but hey, death happens. Could have been a fever, some kind of curse, or maybe the gods had it written in the cards for him. Then, a week later, the same thing happened to Chinedu. Just like Tachukwu, he was fine the night before, talking, eating, having a good time. But the next morning, he was weak, confused, barely able to move. His family tried everything they could think of, herbs, prayers, sacrifices, the whole 9 yards. Nothing worked. By the 3rd day, he was gone too. Then it was Amarachi, then Kalechi, then Nonso. This sickness, it hit them all the same way. Some weird illness would grab hold of them, leaving them speechless, like they were paralyzed. And within days, they were dead. And each one of them had this creepy mark, looked like a snake bite, near their private area. Fear started spreading through the village faster than a wildfire. The elders called a big meeting. Was it a curse? Some kind of punishment from the gods? The healers were racking their brains trying to figure it out. The healers were pulling out all the stops, mixing up potions, burning incense, chanting over the sick guys. But nothing was working, plain and simple. Some of the villagers, they were whispering about this weird mark on each of the men, this little wound right above there, you know. But nobody wanted to talk about it out loud. It was too embarrassing, too freaky. The healers just brushed it off as a snake bite. Nobody put 2 and 2 together. Even when they tried to talk to the men, they couldn't remember anything. They couldn't even talk, period. None of them had ever met Adora out in public, you know. They'd all gone to her in secret, sneaking off at night, meeting her way out in the bush where nobody could see anything. Now, one evening, Adora headed down to the stream to do some laundry and get some water. The sun was getting low, making Otobo look all golden and pretty. The air smelled like dirt and ripe fruit, and the only sound was the leaves rustling in the breeze. Adora knelt down by the water, scrubbing her clothes on a rock. The cool water was splashing on her feet, and she sighed, just enjoying the peace and quiet. Then she heard footsteps. Slow, steady, not in a hurry. She looked up, and her heart skipped a beat. There was this young dude standing at the edge of the stream, holding a bucket. He was looking around at the water, like he was trying to find the perfect spot to fill it up. He wasn't like any of the other guys she'd ever seen. He was tall, broad shoulders, arms like a freaking warrior. His chest, you could kinda see it under his shirt, was solid, and his stomach was flat. But what really got to her were his eyes. They were this piercing blue, like the sky right before dark, the most beautiful eyes she'd ever seen. His skin was glowing in the sunset. He had a strong jawline, full lips, and when he finally looked at her, something inside Adora just changed. She'd seen plenty of good-looking guys before. She could make them weak with just one look, watch them trip all over themselves just to get close to her. But this was different. She realized she was just staring. She quickly looked down and started wringing out her clothes. But she could feel him there, getting closer. Her heart was pounding, but she tried to stay cool. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, smooth, the way it always was. "Good evening," she said, giving him a warm smile. The guy just nodded his head a little. "Evening." His voice was deep, like distant thunder. Adora waited for him to say something else, give her a compliment, look at her for a little too long, show some kind of sign that he was just like all the others. But nothing. Instead, he just walked past her, knelt down by the stream, and stuck his bucket in the water. Adora's fingers tightened around her clothes. Who was this guy? She was expecting him to get all nervous, stumble over his words, stutter like all the other guys did when they got that close to her. But he didn't. He just filled his bucket, stood up, and turned to leave. Just like that. It was like she was just any other woman in the village, like he hadn't even noticed she was anything special. It wasn't until he was almost gone that he finally said something. "My name's Chabik," he said, without even turning around. Then he just walked off. Adora just stood there by the stream, frozen, the clothes in her hands forgotten. Maybe he's just shy, she thought. She played his name over and over in her head, trying it out, letting it sink in. She'd expected him to be like all the others. She thought he'd want her, chase after her, but he didn't. And that was something brand new. Adora started thinking about Chabik more than she wanted to admit. At first, she tried to tell herself it was nothing, just a little curiosity, no big deal. But the days turned into weeks, and Chabik still didn't come looking for her. While the other guys would stumble all over their words when they talked to her, Chabik just spoke plainly, straight to the point, like she was just another person. And the more he ignored her, the more she started noticing him. She saw the way the other women in the village looked at him when he walked by, whispering and giggling behind their hands. He was a hard worker, a hunter, strong and capable. And she heard that he'd only just moved to the village recently. Adora wasn't used to being ignored. She'd grown up with guys chasing after her, watched them lose their minds over her, but not him. Why? Was he married? Didn't he like women? Or was he just blind to how beautiful she was? These questions were buzzing around in her head like a bunch of angry bees, wouldn't let her rest. Finally, she decided, if Chabik won't come to me, then I'll go to him. And that decision was the start of something that nobody in the village would ever forget. Adora was patient. She knew how to play this game. At first, she didn't do anything obvious. She just found excuses to be around him. She'd run into him at the stream, give him a smile, say hello, make a little joke about how heavy his bucket was. She'd walk past his hut on her way to the market, pretend she didn't see him at first, then act all surprised when he called out to her. She made sure her presence lingered, like a light scent on the wind, subtle, but you couldn't ignore it. And Chabik noticed. But he still didn't chase her. He seemed okay with her being around, but he kept his distance whenever she got too close. If she made a joke about how strong he was, he'd chuckle, but that was it. If she leaned in a little too close when they were sitting together, he'd move away just a little bit, enough for her to notice, but not enough to be rude. One afternoon, they were sitting on a fallen tree, the sun warm on their backs. Birds were singing in the trees, and the air smelled like dirt and ripe fruit. Adora was studying Chabik's face, watching the way the sunlight lit him up. He had a strong jaw, smooth skin, and his lips were curved into this relaxed smile. Then, out of nowhere, she just asked, "Chabik, are you a virgin?" Chabik burst into. Chabik just burst out laughing, this deep, hearty laugh that made his whole body shake and his eyes crinkle up at the corners. Adora just watched him, smirking. When he finally stopped laughing, she tilted her head and said, "I doubt that's true." She grinned. "You can't be this good-looking and still be a virgin." Chabik chuckled again, shaking his head, but he didn't answer the question. Instead, he picked up a little rock and threw it off in the distance. "Why does it matter?" he asked, still smiling. Adora shrugged. "Just curious." Chabik gave her this knowing look, but he didn't push it. And for the first time, Adora felt something shift between them. The days went by, and they started seeing each other more and more. There was this big baobab tree on the edge of the village where they liked to sit. It became their spot, a quiet place away from everyone else. One evening, when the sky was turning this deep purple color, they were sitting under that tree. The wind was cool, and the air smelled like wet dirt and smoke from the cooking fires. Chabik leaned back against the tree, crossing his arms. Adaora was sitting next to him, stretching her legs out and drawing patterns in the dirt with her fingers. They were quiet for a while. Then, Chabik said, "I don't want this to be just about one thing." He sounded serious. Adaora looked at him, raising an eyebrow. "I like you," he went on. "For real. I don't want this to be something meaningless." Adaora didn't show anything on her face, but inside, her mind was racing. He was falling for her. Finally, he was saying all the things she'd heard before, the words that guys always whispered to her, the words that always came right before she struck. She'd been patient, she'd played the game perfectly, and now it was time. Chabik turned to her, his eyes soft, but with something deeper in them. "I want more than just sneaking around in the dark," he said. "I want something real." Adaora blinked. Was he serious? Most guys just wanted one thing from her, but Chabik was different. And for a second, when he was looking at her with such honesty, she almost hesitated. But then he moved closer. His smell filled the air, like dirt and warmth and a little bit of sweat and wood smoke. Adaora didn't move away. His breath was warm on her skin, and his fingers brushed against hers, slowly, deliberately. The air between them got thick with something they weren't saying. Then, Chabik whispered, "Let's go to my hut." Adaora's heart skipped a beat. His hut? She'd never gone to any guy's hut before. She couldn't. She always met them out in the bush, in places where nobody could see her, where nobody would suspect anything. If she went to his hut and something happened to him in the morning, people would start talking. But if she said no, would she lose her chance with him? She needed to think fast. Adaora smiled and put her hand gently on Chabik's chest. "Why walk all the way to your hut?" she whispered, "when we could. Just stay here, or find somewhere close," she asked, tilting her head and acting cute. "It'll be more exciting." Chabik frowned a little. "You mean out in the bush?" he asked. Adaora nodded, still smiling. Chabik's face changed. He took her hand, laced his fingers through hers, and shook his head gently. "I think too much of you to do that," he said, firm. "If this is going to happen, it's going to happen the right way. Not in the bush." Adaora's fingers tightened around his. For the first time, she felt trapped. She had two choices: go with him to his hut and risk being seen, or say no and maybe lose her chance forever. Part of her wanted to back out, to just end it right there. But the other part, the one that was too deep into the game, couldn't walk away. So she made her choice. She smiled at Chabik, hiding what she was really feeling. "Okay," she said softly. But inside, she was already planning her next move. Adaora followed Chabik, but she was careful. Real careful. She knew how to slip through the shadows without being seen, moving like a whisper in the night. The village was quiet, with just the flickering torches outside the huts casting long shadows. But Adaora knew it was dangerous to be spotted. If anyone saw her going into a man's hut at that hour, they'd start asking questions. She waited. She listened. When she was sure nobody was watching, she slipped inside. And as soon as the door closed behind them, they were all over each other. Hands were everywhere. Breathless gasps filled the air. It was like they'd been waiting forever for this moment, like the fire between them had finally exploded. Chabik's hands were all over her body, pulling her close, tighter. Adaora knew this part well. She'd done it before, plenty of times. She let him think he was in charge for a little while. Let him feel like he was leading the way. But soon, she took over. Because this was where she was at her best. This was where she had all the power. Chabik lay back, his eyes dark with lust, as she climbed on top of him. She knew exactly how to move, how to make any man completely surrender. And just like all the others, Chabik gave in. His breathing slowed, his eyelids fluttered, and then he passed out. Adaora smirked. It was done. She had him right where she wanted him. And now, the curse would finish its job. She could feel it. The slithering feeling along her spine, the familiar cold touch on her skin as the snake came out. It always happened like this. It didn't shock her anymore. She didn't even need to look down to know what was happening. She could just feel it. The snake, her inheritance, her curse, slithered across the bed, moving towards Chabik, ready to take what it always took. But just as it was about to strike, Chabik's eyes snapped open. Before she could even react, his hand shot out and pushed her off him. Adaora gasped, rolling to the side, completely shocked. How? No guy had ever woken up before she was finished. No guy had ever fought her off. But what happened next froze her blood cold. Chabik sat up and started to speak. But the words, they weren't Igbo, and they weren't from any language Adaora had ever heard. They were old, deep, and strong. And as those words came pouring out of his mouth, the snake changed direction. Adaora's heart was pounding. She watched in horror as the snake turned towards her. It had never done that before. She tried to say something, to tell it what to do. Stop. Nothing. Turn back. Still nothing. Instead, it slid towards her, wrapping itself around her legs, then her waist, tighter and tighter. Adaora screamed. She thrashed, tried to fight it off. But the snake, her snake, wasn't hers to control anymore. It wrapped itself higher, around her ribs, her arms, trapping her so she could barely breathe. She was gasping for air. She looked at Chabik, with desperation in her eyes. Please, she begged. Chabik, stop this. I'll do anything, just stop it. But Chabik wasn't Chabik anymore. Right in front of her, he started to change. His young face got old and wrinkly, his smooth skin dried up, his strong body shrank and shriveled, his shoulders hunched, his hands aged right before her eyes. Adaora's lips were trembling. She couldn't breathe. She'd only seen transformations like this in stories, in legends, in nightmares. Chabik wasn't a young man. He was an old man in disguise. The moment he finished changing, he looked at her. And when he spoke, his voice was deep, ancient, and filled with a quiet rage. Do you know who I am? Adaora couldn't answer. She could barely breathe. But he didn't need her to. He stepped closer, staring at her with eyes that had seen way too much. My name is Nwafer, he said. And you killed my son. Adaora's mind was spinning. His son? She tried to say something. I don't know what you're talking about. You do, he cut her off. And I bet you remember Chukwa. His voice was calm, too calm. I traveled a long way, he went on. I had to know what happened to my boy. I needed answers. Adaora felt her chest getting tighter. I went to a powerful priest, he said, and the priest told me everything. How you inherited your grandmother's curse, how it made your family rich and powerful, but at a terrible price. You had to keep feeding the curse. Nwafer's eyes were burning into her. The priest told me what I had to do, he said. His lips curled into a smile that wasn't really a smile. I had to make you fall for me. Adaora's body went cold. She was the one who'd been hunted all along. The snake was squeezing her tighter. She gasped, struggling, but there was no way out. Nwafer took one slow step forward, and then, in a voice filled with ancient power, he spoke the final words. Words Adaora didn't understand, words that sealed her fate. And in that moment, everything went black. The next day, Adaora got really sick. She decided she had to tell the whole village what she'd done. With tears running down her face, she told them everything. She told them about the curse, how she'd gotten it from her grandmother, how it had given her family wealth and power, but at a horrible cost. She told them that the land needed to be cleansed, or the curse would just jump to another family. Those were her last words before she kicked the bucket. The next morning, they did a ritual, and the land was cleansed. And from that day on, peace came back to the village. As the years went by, the villagers kept telling the story over and over again. Fathers warned their sons to watch out for beauty that didn't have any goodness behind it. Mothers warned their daughters never to chase power if it meant losing their souls. And even today, when the wind blows through that baobab tree at night, the villagers say it's carrying Adaora's voice, a warning, a reminder that evil, no matter how well it's hidden, always gets what's coming to it. So, what's the takeaway here? This story shows us that power you get through being wicked always has a price. No secret stays hidden forever. The truth always finds a way to come out. Justice might take its sweet time, but it's always going to happen. People who hurt others for their own gain are going to face the music sooner or later. If you like this story and you want to hear more like it, let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any more interesting tales.